So the full spectrum will include all of the light, which is mostly everything in that photosynthetically active range. Any other questions before we move on?
So if something says that it's a full spectrum light and something else says it's a grow light and it's like a white grow light, are they pretty much the same, or should you only buy full spectrum grow lights, or does it not make a difference?
I would say that, the term grow light doesn't exactly matter. Things that matter are how much heat does the light emit and how strong is the light. So that's what I would look into, and that kind of reminds me of one other thing from the previous slide, is I did forget to talk about the difference between an LED and a halogen light. There's a few other types as well, but I actually when I started using grow lights, I started using this kind of a light, and it's just a halogen light. And it may have been marketed as a grow light, I don't really remember, but it doesn't look like anything special, So, like in a school or a church, they often have those long halogen lights too. It's kind of the same. So the main consideration here is that a halogen light gives off more heat, and therefore you want to give it a little more distance over your plants because the leaves that are very close to the top dry out. But the LED lights, they are a little bit more expensive to buy sometimes, but they use less electricity, they last longer, you don't have to change the bulb. And I did the math with the old halogen lights that I had versus this new LED, and it was like within 3 years or so, the LED one was cheaper. So if you're going to be using it for a while, you might want to start with LEDs. One other thing on the topic of light before I move on is the distance that your light is from your plant does make a big difference. So let's say the photons, the light is all being emitted by my finger here. They go in all different directions. And so the farther that it is from your plant, the less light is actually reaching the plant. So you want to have it close to the level of all of your plants as possible.
Yeah.
Yes?
I'm one of those reptile people, and I have all of these lights, UVA, UVB lights, and I thought, not only lights anyway when they work for plants.
Yes, so I'm not exactly sure where on the UV spectrum those are emitting. So if they are emitting too far, and this is all visible light, so there is the UV light in this direction, and I'm not sure where the photosynthetically active range starts. That might be something I have to look into. So it might be useful to some extent, but if it has the full spectrum, you get more overall light that is usable by the plant. That's what I was saying.
Sounds like you've got some experimenting to do then, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay, so now talking about humidity. And this is very related to what we were talking about, the guard cells, and how water gets evaporated from the leaf, or whatever you call the cactus tissue, So even when the guard cells are closed, and you only have this very waxy cuticle protecting the water on the inside, if you're in a very dry environment like the cacti that live in the desert of Arizona, you get water still evaporating across this protective layer. And if you're growing them in a more humid environment, you'll have less water loss. And for multi-people, this kind of means that our plants grow better in a humid environment. In some cacti or some succulents, if they're from more of a rainforest type area, like the epiphytes that Mouse was telling me about earlier, those ones probably are more adapted to the humid environment than to the dry environment. But also based on that little sensor that I shared with you, it does have a humidity meter. So right now it's 70% because we're out, this door has been open, there's really no AC or anything here sucking humidity out. So this is the average humidity that we get outside in Ohio in the summer months. And indoors in the winter, last winter my humidity range was in this range. And outside of the grow tent, it was probably closer to the 20% level. So I will say that I have noticed that the grow tent does help with the humidity. I didn't bring the plant today, but there's one that I have that grows aerial roots when it's in a humid environment. And it's one that I've had for more than 10 years, and it's never given me aerial roots before I started using this. So it is a Schefflera? Schefflera, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I do have ficus too, but no aerial roots yet. Yeah.
we have a few that just love sending them out like crazy.
In your little greenhouse?
We have one at Crowder Stoneman that just like, we'll have it on a table and it's just the air elements are like flowing out the bottom.
Yeah, it's kind of, for bonsai, it looks more like the plant, how it would look in its native environment. So it's very cool when you can cultivate those growing them here. But yeah, so that's just something to think about for your individual species, that you have to think about where they're coming from. But on the more generic plant side, and this might be especially useful if you have other types of plants that aren't cacti, that aren't doing that CAM photosynthesis that we talked about earlier. So these ones are the type that they open their stomata during the day, and they allow the water to pass through so that they can get more efficient photosynthesis. So this experiment, they used orange trees, and they grew them in controlled greenhouse settings. And they basically showed that with the very humid air, there was a higher rate of photosynthesis than when they moved the plants to dry air. So this is because it enables the plant to keep the guard cell open for longer, to keep the gas exchange happening throughout the day while it's doing photosynthesis. And here's something that I thought may apply to your specific cacti and succulent needs. So I know that a lot of people do this kind of leaf propagation. I've started a jade plant that way myself, and having a little extra humidity can help this process along. Obviously, you don't want it to be too wet, you don't want to oversaturate the soil, but especially if the leaf starts to wrinkle while you're doing this, propagation, then you can spray it with some water and help it survive until the roots really take hold. So spray bottle is a very basic tool. The only thing is it's very dependent on your ability to monitor the plants and your ability to remember to spray the plants. So if you have more intense humidity needs, the grow greenhouse, yes, that's the word. Grow tents and greenhouse are a very easy way because they contain all the water that the plants evaporate basically. Humidifiers could also work if you're got a dedicated room or a, what's your room called?
Solarium.
Yeah, or one of those. Then you can humidify that dedicated grow room. And in bonsai, we also use some humidity trays, but I will say that you don't really see a lot of benefit from them unless you have a very large, like lots of plants on a more large tray. But it does help to locally reduce the water needs of the plant. Okay, so now we're going to move to airflow, and for this one, it was a little bit harder to find scientific papers that had done research on this, so I want to ask a little more about your experiences. Has anyone seen problems from lack of airflow in regards to your cacti and your succulents?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What types of problems do you usually see?
Growth of other things.
Of other things, like weeds or
Disease,
fungi?
disease, fungus, and
Yeah.
powdery mildew, and my cactus collection is always plagued by an unknown fungus, which we still have not figured out what it is.
Mhm.
And it's all probably due to airflow, even though I have fans running 24/7.
Yeah.
Still, it's a problem.
It's kind of a cascading thing, because you get the fungus in there and other things, and then the mealy bugs are just standing by, ready
Yeah.
to jump on a plant.
Waiting for it.
Yeah, so, yeah.
I will say that kind of as Doug just alluded to, the airflow is very, very related to humidity. So I also was thinking that fungal issues would probably be a likely issue. And in the grow tent, how I deal with, not letting it get too humid is I have my duct down here. And so if you buy a grow tent, they have ducts all over. I could put a fan here, I could put a fan here, and I could put a fan here. So I have a fan here that's blowing air in. It's blowing fresh air into the grow tent. And then I did not buy a second fan to blow air out because I figured if air comes in, it must go out. And so I saved some money that way. But you can also add other fans to enhance that setup. And there's one rule of thumb for grow tents or greenhouses that I found when I was looking this up. And there's been a lot of work done optimizing grow tents by marijuana growers. I don't know why, but you might imagine. Anyways, so they recommended for every cubic foot of your grow tent, you want to be circulating that amount of air every minute. And so this fan that I have is actually much stronger than I need for this, but it's the smallest fan that you could get for this grow tent. So airflow is definitely good just to be mindful of it.
Is there much of a difference between having the air coming in from the bottom versus coming in from the top and doing it?
You know, I chose to have it coming in from the bottom because all of the heat from this, I wanted to retain the extra heat that this light up here is giving me. So if I was blowing air over it, it would be almost like cooling it down. So that's why I didn't do it that way. If anything, I'm okay with that air going out, but you know, you can imagine kind of the convection current going like this. That's kind of why I chose to set it up that way, but you can experiment, and I'm not saying that I know the exact best way to do this because I've only had this grow tent for 2 years, but this has worked for me so far.
I was just thinking like aquariums, you have like air water filtration for the same sort of calculation, you know, different rates and things like that. You know, certain things would prefer it flowing more than others, or certain rates and like that too. So a lot of plants, you know, have grown sometimes like a lot of water with it, like ones from rivers and stuff.
Yeah. I'm also thinking that like if you've got if you've got humidity trays underneath there, having the air blow across it and then convect it up would also help distribute the humidity too.
It might not make much difference in the size setup anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely did notice the humidity was greatest on the bottom level, and then kind of near the plants up here in this area it starts to lessen. So that's just something I measured with my little, this little friend, whatever you call it. ThermoPro. Yeah. So again, if you do decide to get a grow tent, it's good to experiment for yourself based on the location of your house, the exact plants that you're putting in. If you have plants that are more susceptible to fungi, maybe you want to put it closer to the fan so it's getting more of that airflow directly. Just things to think about there. And you can have external fans if you're not going to be crazy enough to get a grow tent. So I think that now we're going to get to the review phase. So these are the 4 main pillars that I want us all to keep in mind when we're growing our indoor plants. Every new species that you are getting, you should know exactly, not exactly, but roughly, what is the environment that it's from, what is its preferences for light and temperature and humidity, and then airflow is just good for general health anyway. So. And this is just a review of what these things allow us to do. So warm temperatures, we can avoid breathing injury. We can, through these warm temperatures, light and humidity, we can help our plants have more photosynthesis, have faster growth, and if you're in commercial growing, that also can be helpful, increase the speed of your production. And same with humidity, you can also propagate and get more plant friends that way. And airflow, preventing fungal issues is our main one. So, yeah, I think I have pretty much recapped already, but just for a second time, because I heard that things stick with you the best if you explain them twice. So I don't want to tell everyone that you have to go and get the most expensive tools to grow your plants inside. If you love the idea of this, you're happy to do that, go ahead. But the main thing is you can start small. You can add a little fan to your area, add a little grow light to your area, and a little timer for your grow light. You know, you don't have to do everything all at once. And then year by year, just kind of experiment and see what works for you. So that's my recommendation. And of course, like that last line says, there's no substitute for the real sun and for fresh air, of course. We can spend a lot of money trying to imitate it, but in the end, it's much easier to work with nature than against it. So, if you want to learn more about my bonsai, I have a website. I've got some articles on there. I've got tree pruning portfolio, bonsai portfolio. I do a podcast now where I interview some bonsai artists around the country. And in 2023, I'm actually in like the most busy part of my PhD right now, so I didn't do it this year. But next year, I will be registering with the state as an official nursery, and I'll be selling some of my extra plants and doing some workshops and things. So you can find me Ride232 on all of these social medias. I don't do TikTok, but you can find me there too if you want. And of course, the Columbus Bonsai Society. This is that's where Mouse and I met. And we are having our 50th annual show next weekend at the Dogs Arboretum. It's kind of near Buckeye Lake, so not too far of a drive. A little bit of a drive, but not too far.
There's a great ice cream place on the way back on 40.
Okay, you got me there.
They sell real Hershey ice cream.
What's the place called?
I have no idea. It's been around from when my mom was a child, and they have a big ice cream cone sign in front of them. I think it's Clay's.
Okay, I'll have to look it up because I'll be there both days.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, is it Clay's? I think it's Clay's.
I just remember the ice cream cone.
That's all I remember.
There's a memorable ice cream cone then.
Just
So.
drive by the ice cream cones.
Yeah, well, that's what you do. You just drive on 40 instead of getting right on the 70 where it tells you to. You just stay on 40. I think it's like a D.
Okay, good to know. Yes.
I wanted to add something about your temperature observations with photosynthesis. When it comes to cactus and succulents, especially with crassulacean acid metabolism, which they use to photosynthesize, warm temperatures in the day are important, but it's more efficient for the cam cycle to be very cool at night.
Yes, that is
So with cacti and succulents, it's more beneficial to be warm and very cool in the night. So you want to be a big difference there, which I'm not so certain a grow tent can always facilitate that.
Yeah, so the main difference that my grow tent would get, just from the way that I have set it up right now, is if you have the fan going 24/7 and then the light only going for those 12 hours, the light does raise the temperature during the day, and then the fan will still be going once the light is off, and so that could help cool the grow tent down a little bit faster than if there was no fan. So it's not as big of a difference as it would be if it was in the desert, of course. But there's probably like a 10 to 15 temperature difference there.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brian.
Well, thank you very much.
Very well done.
I have one question. The reflective surface of the tent versus like the little greenhouses, how significant is that?
It's a good question. So this tent is lined with mylar, and I will say that probably both a glass greenhouse and mylar are somewhat protected, or not protected, reflective. But probably the mylar is more reflective because you can imagine the light hitting the glass, some of it will go back out.
Sure.
Yeah. But I don't know if anybody else has more direct experience. I haven't compared the two of them directly.
Even white surfaces can be very good
Yeah.
reflection.
Okay.
Doesn't
if
necessarily
you-
have to
yeah,
be
if you
silver.
get greenhouse, it will get more reflective if there's condensation. And if anybody wants, I have some postcards for the show that's next week. We have 2 minutes, so even if you're not going to go, feel free to take one. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
What is this plant up here?
This is a bougainvillea. Also, one last thing. I have some cuttings if anybody wants. I was doing a little training while I was waiting.
I just want to check it out. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And
It's a
how-
tropical plant.
How would you root those?
Oh, there's one in the, sorry.
In the surface